Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Distribution Strategy Group State of Sales and Wholesale Distribution. My name is Ian Heller with Distribution Strategy Group. Our featured star today is going to be Mike Kunkle. Mike is one of the world's leading experts on sales management for distributors. We're delighted to have him on the program today. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. You should see a little button somewhere on your screen, depends on the platform you're using. Mike will get to most of those at the end of the presentation today. He's got a lot of content to cover, but we will make an attempt to answer every question you send in. But before we get started with the content, we got to pay the bills. So let's just take a couple of minutes to talk about our sponsors. The first one is us. We have sponsored our own program to tell you about an amazing new live conference. We're delighted to bring you what we think is the first ever live conference about AI for distributors. It's called Applied AI for Distributors. We're really excited about it. You can find out more on our homepage. There's a banner at the top. Our keynote speaker is Zach Cass, who's the head of go-to-market for OpenAI. They are the people who bring you ChatGPT. So we're looking forward to an hour presentation from him and then 30 minutes of Q&A. We're going to cover topics like how to prepare your organization for AI, your technology stack, your customer data, your product data. How do you build an AI roadmap, and what kind of talent do you need and where you're going to get it? And then there'll be presentations from technology companies specifically on the AI-enabled capabilities they have today, and we'll provide over the next 12 to 24 months. If you want to save $50 on the conference, that's 5%. It's a $995 conference. If you want to save $50, then as a thank you for being on this particular program, you can go to the registration website and use promo code Kunkle, K-U-N-K-L-E. That's the last name of today's presenter. You've got until 5 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow to save $50 on this conference. You're not going to want to miss this if you're interested in AI, and who isn't interested in AI. And we're delighted that White Cup, who has sponsored today's program, is also sponsoring the Applied AI for Distributors Conference because they've got great AI-enabled tools, and they are a fantastic company when it comes to supporting distributors with technology that makes your company better. So hope to see you at the conference. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the other sponsor of today's program, which is Helen Pena, one of our many friends over at White Cup. Helen, welcome to the program. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here with DSG on this webinar on the state of wholesale distribution sales. Distribution sales is a topic that we live and breathe every day here at White Cup. So White Cup helps distributors use their data to make better decisions that lead to profitable growth. Our BI-powered CRM is built for distributors, and we have hundreds and hundreds of customers on our platform that help drive their top and bottom line. Next slide. Yeah. So we believe that selling should be smart, fast, and easy for distributors. And that's what we help make possible. For example, we have a customer that is a billion-dollar organization with over 20,000 products. Their name is PIP. You might know them. Our CRM with BI is now a tool for them to gain insights into their business and uncover opportunities even faster. And on top of that, they close deals 75% faster, literally what they told us. It's amazing. So selling smarter, faster, and easier. Oh, just a little bit longer. Thanks. Just a little bit longer. Really does matter. So what do I mean by smarter, faster, and easier? So smart selling means having your sales rep access customer and product data insight right from their CRM. Selling fast means that you access your ERP data quickly and very, very fast. And it means sending marketing emails and using automated workflows to engage with the sales leads very fast, all possible with the BI-powered CRM integrated within your ERP. And selling easily means that your sales reps have everything that they need to sell more to their existing customers or even new customers, from a quoting tool that's built for distributors to customer trend data. Okay, go ahead, next slide. So we'd love to talk to you. If you have any questions, if you're wondering how you're doing right now, let's stay in touch. Here's how you can contact White Cup and also me directly. And that's it. Now I'll pass it back on to DSG.
Hey, Helen, before you go, I had the honor of facilitating a panel of users at your user conference a couple of months ago, and the love for your products was really impressive. It was really startling, right? In a positive way. And your customers love the stuff that you offer them. You make their lives easier, which is what it's all about in business to business, right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Awesome. Okay, Helen, nice to see you. Thanks very much for
Yeah,
sponsoring this
thanks.
program. You bet. You bet. Okay, now let me introduce the star of the show. It's Mike Kunkle. Mike, how are you today?
Hey, Ian, I am absolutely awesome. Thank you for having me here.
Well, I knew
Helen,
that. I knew that.
oh, well, goodness. You're my newest best friend. And Helen, thank you and White Cup for sponsoring, so I could be here today. We're going to talk about the state of sales in wholesale distribution today, but sort of with a twist, if you will, right? I want to talk about the state of sales at your company, and we have a lot to cover about this, so I'm just going to dive right into it. Whoops. And I'm going to turn my video back on because I didn't even mean to do that.
You know what I'll do? I'll turn mine off, Mike, just to make it even.
Oh, there you go, Ian. So you may be wondering, Mike, who? And so other than the guy who has his own special promo code for an AI conference, I have been around in the space in the sales profession for more years than I should probably have put on this slide. And for almost 30 of those, I have been doing sales performance improvement work in a variety of verticals and industries, and you can see a bunch of them here. But in the past almost 5 years now, I've been working specifically with wholesale distributors in, wholesale distribution. And you can see some sample experience, employers and clients, and sample results. So if you want to know more about me, there's a slide at the end as well, but that's a little bit about me and some of the companies that I've been working with. Now, I do actually have a plan for today. So if you know me, you're probably smiling now. But we're going to talk about the state of sales and a smart path forward. So we're going to start really as in a two-parter here. Well, I'll talk about the current state of sales in the industry, but I want to share the state of sales generally. I also want to focus on why the state of sales for the entire vertical is less important than what's happening in your own backyard. So yeah, I'll share qualitative and quantitative evidence about where we are as a profession, but then I want to dig into a path forward to really talk about it from your perspective and make it more relevant and contextual for you. And I'm going to share some tools and a plan on how you can assess and improve the state of sales at your company. Now, fair warning, right? Especially for this first part, I'm going to move pretty quickly, and there's going to be some data and things on the slide that I'm providing that I'm giving to you as a resource that you can look back at later. So we're not going to dive into deep detail on every single thing. I want these slides to be a resource for you. You can look back at and remember, oh, that's what Kunkle talked about. And oh, okay, let me take a deeper look at that. So we're going to move quickly in some places, and then in the path forward, we'll slow down a bit and get into what are the steps that you can take to improve sales effectiveness in your own personal state of sales. That's our plan. So to start off, my first point as we think about the state of sales in our profession is that wholesale distribution is not just one thing. It's kind of like saying these are all cars, right? Yes, they're all four-wheeled vehicles with engines, but they're not really all the same thing, are they? And we're not either, right? So the state of sales in wholesale distribution is really contextual. For example, distributors vary by product type, right? Such as NAICS code 423, 424, 425. Sometimes it's hard to imagine that we all fit into 3 codes, right? But those are the NAICS code version. Another variance with distributors is ownership structure, including everything from chains to independents, public and private companies, private equity owned, employee owned, big variance. Market and the pricing strategies vary as well, right? From low cost providers to premium level value added providers and everything in between. And here's where it gets really interesting, right? Expanding on the NAICS codes, look at all the different vertical market subsegments that make up wholesale distribution. And in fact, we could go deeper on this, and I'll stop here, but we could spend quite a while on this, which really just brings me back to the point that I'm trying to make. Wholesale distribution is not just one thing. the state of sales, therefore, while I can share some general data, is going to be very contextual. So let's build on that theme. I want you to consider three things here. First, your customer life cycle, their buying process, the journey they go through when they buy things from you, and your sales process. Now, in that life cycle, there are the three things that you see here. There's stuff that happens before they buy from you. There's stuff that happens while they're buying from you. And then there's stuff that happens after they buy from you. Now, here's an example of a consultative life cycle or process when customers are buying a solution to implement to solve a specific problem. Don't worry about the minute details or all the fancy stage names. This is just an example, right? And it may not be relevant for your company. The main point is that customers do business planning. They begin to execute their plans. They run into problems. They decide to look for solutions externally, start a purchase pursuit or a buying process, ending with them buying a solution and implementing it. And again, this is just that consultative process example. Smart companies then align their sales process with this customer life cycle, and specifically that part in the middle, the buying process. Again, just one example from a template that I use. Now, let's switch hats. To continue making the point about how contextual all of this is, in other distributors, the customer life cycle and buying process is different. For these customers, it's about selecting a supplier, purchasing products, stocking them, reselling or reusing them, and reordering. And so this would be a transactional flow example for that customer life cycle and a somewhat different sales process that aligns to it and supports it. And here they are side by side. Now, in some companies, only one of these two life cycles and sales processes are in place. Only one is needed. There's transactional flow business. There are solutions that get bought and sold and customized to solve a problem. But in many distributors, maybe in yours, and many of my clients, both of these are happening inside the same company at the same time. There are bespoke solutions and there's a transactional order flow. So let's take this one level deeper. So in addition to these engineered or bespoke solutions and transactional order flows, we have digital transformations occurring with customers purchasing directly through e-commerce, right? To further complicate it, in some companies, we have both inside and field sales. And inside sales can be everything from full cycle, that sales process we just saw. It's an inside group that does everything field sales does, just from a chair with a phone and email. Or they may work only outbound, selling smaller customers, trying to find ones to grow, to turn over to the field sales team. In other companies, inside sales is inbound, almost more like customer service, taking phone calls and taking orders from customers. And again, in some distributors, inside sales is bisected and does both inbound and outbound. Interesting, right? And yet, after all of that, still, there's often no formal sales process or sales methodology documented. In many distributors, process and methodology are not formally designed, documented, or managed with any degree of consistency and accuracy. It's a bell curve, right? There are some who are crushing it. There are some who are doing okay at it. And then there's some who are barely even thinking about process and methodology the way that many other verticals do. So it's a bell curve, but it's a truism that in the state of sales and wholesale distribution, formal process and methodology are relatively rare. Now, let's take another factor defining the state of sales, right? Is that wholesale distribution is a very mature vertical industry. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because many distributors operate on what I call momentum fuel. It's similar to Newton's first law of physics, right? A body in motion tends to stay in motion unless it's disrupted by an external force. In many distributors, they're selling based on momentum because the buyers are buying based on momentum. It's not necessarily because of best-in-class sales practices. I want you to hold on to that thought, and I'll share some data in a bit to back up my opinion on this. Now, wherever you are on the bell curve of all of these contextual things that were talked about, I can promise you one thing: change is coming. And if it's not here or ready for you, it's coming soon to a desk near you. I won't read this entire list to you, but take a look at some of the possible external change forces that either are or may be headed at distributors like a tornado. This tornado has passed through some of your verticals, your subsectors in your companies and your customers with ongoing business model disruption, right? We hear about this all the time everywhere. The pandemic certainly had an impact on us, right? And if the recession truly hits, that may as well. But all of these other factors that you see here are possible external change forces. And the question that we must ask ourselves is, are we going to change now by choice or later by force? This is an important question because I see far too many either sitting still or just doing minor tinkering with their sales force rather than taking a full-fledged, strategic, purposeful, and intentional approach to reshape their business in the way that they go to market. This always reminds me of the old quote from Will Rogers: even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. Food for thought, right? Now, speaking of the need for change, here's another contextual statement about the state of sales in our fine profession. Wholesale distributors haven't typically trained their sellers. Oh, sure, right? Product training almost always provided. It's often done by manufacturers or vendors or our suppliers. But when there is sales training, it's usually event-based, right? You get people together in some place for 1 or 2 days and somebody teaches them something. It's not actually reinforced much after that. It's not typically wrapped into the culture to make it the way we do things around here. It's just nice training that is a benefit to people, but doesn't necessarily change anything or the way that we do business. I think my friend Dirk Beveridge, who I'm sure you know, is right with this quote based on his research. Dirk reported that 82% of distribution leaders believe that attracting and retaining the talent needed for growth will be the challenge for the next decade. I think these leaders that he surveyed, and Dirk, are right. And I'd like to share some data to show why this is so important right now. So to wrap up the first part of this presentation on the state of sales and wholesale distribution, I have some data that I want to dig into with you. At Sparks IQ, where I work, we partner with a company called Objective Management Group. They do Salesforce evaluations and hiring assessments for sales. Now, they've been in business for over 30 years. They've assessed over 2 million people. So the data I'm sharing here comes just from North America because they do this globally. And I've only used the past 10 years rather than going back all the way for the 30 years full of data, just because I think the past 10 years probably has a little bit more relevancy to the world today than the data from 30 years ago. So here's what we're going to do. On the left side of this slide, I'm going to display data from the candidates and employees in all verticals, which includes wholesale distribution, but it's everybody. There are going to be over 463,000 evaluations in this data set, so it's very valid and large. On the right side, I'm going to share data from just our vertical, NAICS codes 423 through 425, for just employees currently working in wholesale distribution companies. Okay, so let's dive in a bit. And the percentage of salespeople who are strong in the competency is what you're going to see. You're going to see percentages, and these are those who are strong in the listed competencies. Let's take a look. So let's start with what OMG calls the will to sell. Will to sell is what some people refer to as the fight in the dog or grit, if you've read that book. This includes the desire for success in sales, not in general, in the selling profession, the commitment to success in their sales role, their outlook, positive, negative, neutral, how motivated the person is and how they're motivated, altruistic, extrinsic or intrinsic, and whether they take full responsibility and accountability for their results, or whether they tend to blame external factors when they don't get the results that they were hoping for, when they're not successful. For desire, for example, if you look at the 94%, that means that 94% of the people assessed were strong in desire for success in sales. You'd certainly hope that if they're in a sales role, right? 77% were in the strong category on commitment to success in sales, and so on. Now, let's compare that to the distribution data, right? And compare that to the general market stats on the left. Look at that. We've got the same desire, but the commitment is quite a bit less. That's interesting, right? And it's actually not surprising given the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, we're in a very mature vertical, right? And so many of the people selling in distribution have been doing it for a very long time in their role. It doesn't mean that they're not committed to being successful in general, doesn't mean they're not committed to the company, but they have less to prove at this point in their careers. So they're less likely to run face first into a brick wall to try to knock it down. And that's what you can take away from this when you look at that. You see this a lot in companies where salespeople have been in the role a long time or have been successful, a little bit less commitment to do whatever it takes, right? So that's not a crushing stat there. Outlook is a bit less positive, motivation is a bit less, and responsibility, or the willingness to take full accountability for results versus blaming those external factors, is also quite a bit lower, especially since our results are included in the data to the left, meaning that many other verticals were higher than the 48% to offset that against those in distribution, which were lower, right? So that's an important factor. Next, let's look at what OMG calls sales percentile, or the percent of people who are in the elite category and who assess like true top performers. On the bottom, under the development heading, you'll see will to sell again, this time displayed as a culmination of all the factors that fall under it. And then an important one, how coachable the employees are, and what OMG calls their figure it out factor, right? And I describe that as someone who can drink from a fire hose versus a sippy cup, right? They can absorb large amounts of information, they're great problem solvers, and they figure things out, right? Hence, figure it out factor, right? Ability to absorb data, problem solve, and get results, right? And again, these are the percentages people who excel or are in the elite category of those competencies. Here's the data for distribution in comparison. Only 5% of employees in distribution are in that elite category of sellers. Will to sell, quite a bit lower, as we already knew, and we're very close on coachability. This is going to be important. Figure it out factors quite a bit lower, but again, you can almost rationalize this, that if you're in the same role for 20, 25, 30 years, there's a whole lot less that you're figuring out about that role at this point, right? So again, that one's sort of explainable. Now let's look at what OMG calls sales DNA. These are foundational mindsets and beliefs that either support or hinder success in sales. You see things like not having a high need for approval. Sales reps who have a high need for approval are afraid to have a conversation with a client or something where you really have to tell them something that's true that they don't want to hear, or you need to give them advice about something that they weren't expecting, or you need to tell them about a price increase that's going to impact them, right? Salespeople with high needs for approval are hesitant to do those things, or even hesitant to be consultative sellers, right? So that's a fairly important one. Mindsets and beliefs that support success in sales roles, supportive buy cycle, which is interesting. This means that when you buy something that you think of as a high ticket item, whatever that means for you, if you like to look around at a bunch of places and price shop, And if you like to step back and think it over before you make the purchase, you are more likely to accept those behaviors from your clients and then not nudge them appropriately to make the best decision for them to move forward. Right. And so sales DNA also considers things like comfort discussing finances and money, how well they handle rejection and so on. You can see the percentage of people who excel in these competencies and have very high sales DNA. Now, here's how we stack up against that in distribution. The first two were very close, right? That's a good sign. We're a bit lower on supportive beliefs and supportive buy cycle, a good chunk lower on comfort discussing money. I have a client who really worked hard to address this, and they started to qualify deals more effectively, started to be checking credit and funding more effectively. They spent a lot less time wasting time on deals that were never going anywhere. Right? But many of the sellers were hesitant to have those discussions up front until they really started to address this and help them get better at it. Right? This, but you look at all of this on handling rejection, resilience, this paints a fairly close picture on sales DNA, which is a good sign because it's a lot harder to close gaps, competency gaps in sales DNA than it is in skills. People often ask me, hey, Mike, is it possible to help someone improve their mindsets and beliefs like this? And the answer is yes, absolutely it is, but it is harder than just training somebody because now you're going under the surface a bit into their belief systems. So it's a lot like the old joke. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but the light bulb has to want to change. And it's the same thing as you're helping people address some of these issues as well. Now, here, finally, the fun one, the 10 selling competencies that they measure for. These are things like the ability to hunt for new business, to reach the real decision makers, to build trusting relationships, do consultative selling and sell value over price, to qualify opportunities, not rushing to make presentations, and making sure you're presenting to the right people at the right time, not just feature dumping at people who don't want to hear it. And, closing and gaining commitments, really important. The ability to follow a defined sales process. We've already said that this is something that isn't necessarily as strong in distribution. And again, these are percentages of people who excel in these in the general market, including distribution. Now, here's how we align to this, right? And this is where you see the impacts of distributors not training their sales force as much as other industries. Hunting skills, far lower, almost half. Now, again, not necessarily that surprising for us because in a mature vertical, you already have most of the customers you're going to have unless you steal market share from competitors. Although these same kind of hunting skills can be used inside an account to grow it, breaking into a new division, breaking into new product lines, that sort of thing. Reaching decision makers, ouch, less than half. Surprisingly, even relationship building skills are somewhat lower, as are the ability to sell consultatively, sell value, and qualify deals effectively. Now look at this, we're actually a bit better than the market in terms of our presentation approach, meaning we don't rush to make formal presentations. We do it when it makes sense to present to the right people without pitching. Closing on both sides here is abysmal, but we've seen this pattern over the last 5 years or so that closing skills or techniques have become less and less important when you can do the other consultative selling and selling value well. So I don't get overly concerned about those. If you do the other things well, it's a natural process to move forward. We are far less adept at managing a disciplined sales process. We saw that earlier, so no surprise there. And we do lag at working with sales technology compared to other verticals. There are a lot of distributors that barely have a CRM in place today. And I see us moving in this direction with all the talk about not just e-commerce, but all the talk about AI and other tools, right? So this is improving, but we're still not where other verticals are in terms of adopting sales technology to improve both sales effectiveness and efficiency. Here are some of the miscellaneous things that OMG looks at, some other scores. Posturing means professional presence and that first impression, that somebody makes. The rest are relatively self-explanatory, except for the difference between account management and farming. This is sort of unique to the way OMG define things. They believe that account management is when an account manager has a large territory of accounts with A, B, C, D accounts mixed in, versus managing one monster account or maybe 1 to 3 large accounts with the express intent to grow those accounts. So that's how they view the difference between account management and farming. Here's how we stack up on these. First impressions and professional presence are lower. Again, we're working with people that we've known for a long time, where those skills aren't probably as honed. Negotiating, right? Quite a bit lower. And we see this a lot at our company, that negotiating is a definite opportunity for improvement. There's far less proficiency with video selling. I don't see much of that happening in our space. And social selling is almost abysmal in our industry, but in our defense, not as many of our buyers are on social media, on LinkedIn, for example. They might have a presence there, but they're not incredibly active. So a little bit less for us than the rest of the world. Also, as we've already talked about, sales technology is low, and that has impacted the CRM savvy piece. The one that's kind of surprising here for me was account management, since that's what most of distribution sellers are doing, just not to the level that happens in other industries. So, for example, it's not as strategic, as planned, or as purposeful. Not that we're not doing it, right? But we're not really doing what most consider to be strategic account management. I don't think we have many sellers in our space who are managing 1 to 3 accounts, right? So the limited skills on farming, not that different from the general marketplace. As with the previous slides on the 10 selling competencies, on this one, there's a lot of opportunity here for improvement. I want to show one other view now of just those 10 selling competencies. This will include the average competency scores rather than just the percent of those who excel, okay? And so here you see both at the same time. Those in the green are above average. Those in the yellow, think of as average, excuse me, and those in the red are below average. As we saw earlier, we're close on some of these, right? And we're pretty far off on others and excel only in presentation approach compared to the general market. If you're looking at trying to grow the business through hunting and bringing in new business through new business development, active prospecting, take a look at the hunting one, right? Significant difference there. Reaching decision makers, significant difference there. Even relationship building is closer, a bit closer on this one, but selling value less, consultative selling less, right? So again, though, skills. These are skill-based type of things. So what's the takeaway from all of this data? And you can go back and look more deeply into it, but these are the things I think that are big 3 takeaways. First, wholesale distribution does lag behind the sales capabilities and competencies of sellers in other verticals. Our sales forces just haven't been trained as frequently or as much. And honestly, they're not often managed quite as closely. Many have been around for a long time doing what they do. So the will to sell, the sales DNA, coachability, were not dramatically different, right? And so that's a really good sign, because that means that we don't need to influence those things as much, because those aren't quite as changeable or influenceable. Now, the biggest difference, right, is in the selling competencies. And the good news, bad news story here is that while the selling competencies are far lower than the average market, these are the things that are trainable. They can be developed and coached to mastery. So this data actually shows us a tremendous opportunity for distribution sales forces. It's especially provides an opportunity for those who are willing to act to create competitive differentiation based on their talent. That's the good news takeaway. Now, given that, one of the things that you can do in starting to move towards sort of our path forward is assess where you are today on what I call the bell curve of Salesforce effectiveness maturity. You can see the 5 levels across the bottom, right? And they're based on how much effort you're placing on purposely improving the level of Salesforce effectiveness at your company. On the far left, there's almost no effort to very low effort. Many distributors are in the next bucket, right, operating on that momentum fuel I talked about with a random approach to Salesforce effectiveness. In the middle, most are doing something informally maybe, but they're trying to figure out how to be more effective or more efficient. To the right of that, some are taking a very strategic approach and putting formal systems and process and methodology and tools into place. Very few have made it to the far right yet. There are some, right? But this would be high levels of mastery, optimizing systems, optimizing their sales force and their outcomes, right? This is where you can think of as a continuum, right? A bell curve, and then ask yourself, right? Where am I on this thing and where do I want to be? So that's the idea of this chart, is to allow you to assess where you are, where you want to go, to be able to deliver repeatable, replicable, scalable, and predictable results. It's a great start to self-assess, right? Because it begins to move us away from this generic state of sales that I've shared with you to the very specific state of sales effectiveness at your company. And this is what leads us to the path forward. So I want to share some concepts and tools that you can take away from this and apply almost immediately at your company. It starts with what I call a situation assessment. This comes from the consulting world, but it can be used in sales discovery. We use this at our Modern Sales Foundations course. It can be used in sales effectiveness and sales enablement work. I wrote about this in my book, right? This very simple chart helps set the context by documenting who sells what to whom and how. And remember, we saw those process charts earlier. You may have more than one story to tell. You could be selling a bespoke engineered solution. You might be selling the transactional order flow and orders and reorders, and it could be a combination. So you may have to do this more than once, right? But the whole idea here is for each scenario, you assess where you are today or point A, the current state. What are the challenges you face, the opportunities you can capitalize on, and the impacts of either not resolving those challenges or not capitalizing on those opportunities? Then you can jump over to the desired future state and define the outcomes you want to achieve and how you would prioritize those outcomes. Now, that allows you to step back, compare the two, and do a gap analysis in between the two states and determine what the needs are or what you would need to do to close the gap and move from point A to point B. Now, the acronym there, COINOP, right? Challenges, opportunities, impacts, needs, outcomes, and priorities. And you're doing this in this current state, desired future state format, right? And then once you have that, you can then do the impact analysis to see what would you save, what risk could you avoid, and what gains you would achieve if you made the move to the desired future state. If you dollarize those things, then you can compare to the cost of the initiatives that would help you close the gap and actually do an ROI analysis. This assessment allows you to identify compelling business issues, tie them to your strategic objectives, which is critical, and prioritize and execute initiatives according to the value that they're going to deliver for you. This is the beginning of really doing purposeful Salesforce effectiveness. As you're doing this work, as you're doing this situation assessment, you can thinking about these initiatives, you want to consider the factors that I see that are frequently influencing the state of sales and wholesale distribution. So look around this circle, right? Starting from the top. How deep is your buyer and customer and market acumen? In other words, how well do you really know your customers, the roles, what matters to them? How well do you know their coin op, their challenges, opportunities, impacts, needs, outcomes, and priority? Are you selling the way that your buyers want to buy today? Is your sales model or models right for the way that you want to go to market based on that? Have you done the appropriate e-commerce and digital transformations? Do you have a well-defined sales process that you can manage? I almost know the answer to that one. What's the level of selling skills, like we talked about earlier with the objective management group comparison, right? Or the sales methodology that you use. Do you even have a purposeful methodology that you teach all of your sellers? How would you assess your sales force in terms of their ability to do that new business development, that hunting, right, that we didn't score so well on earlier, or account management? How about your approach to managing the sales force? Are you into a cadence? Do you have systems in place? Are managers managing their teams the same way? Or are you living by that momentum fuel that we talked about? And then overall, how effective are your talent management and development strategies at your company? These are important factors to consider and questions to answer. And I see these factors weekly, either influencing the impact of distributor sales forces by helping or by hindering their success. So let's do something with this. And another way to look at these factors is by rating them independently at your company. And I just one example here with dials, right? You can rate the importance of these factors, or you can rate your current state in each, or you can do both. Because the big question is, and the only one that really matters, is not how these factors are impacting the rest of distribution, but how are they impacting your company with each one of these? And this is a format that I have found helpful over the years to answer these questions. So what I've done, you can see on the left, here are all the factors that we just talked about from top to bottom. Then there's a column for an urgency rating, and then a rating scale across the top. I used 1 to 10, but you can pick any scale you want as long as it makes sense to you and your leadership team. Then you ask yourself, where are we today on each of these factors? What's the current state, right? And you can transfer some of this right from the situation assessment that you've done. And then where should we be, right? Which is the desired future state. And for us at our company, what's the urgency of closing the gap for each factor based on how far or how close we are to where we want to be? It's just a logical process that you can go through to get there. And it looks like this, right? When you're done, you can see urgency, you can see, where you are currently, you can see the desired future state and all the gaps. You can use this analysis. The whole idea of this is to get you and your leadership team engaged to have these discussions, to align on the ratings, and then use this analysis to prioritize your actions. You can do this by identifying the high urgency factors with the biggest gaps, and then creating initiatives and action plans in priority order, right? Because you're prioritizing this stuff to address the gaps. All of this ties back to your desired future state from that original situation assessment. It's a very logical, step-by-step way to work through your situation. Then to create meaningful, relevant action plans, I recommend conducting a force field analysis. On the left side here, I just have all the factors listed again, since this is a sample form, but you would only list those chosen factors from your previous work in their priority order. On the top, you see a place to summarize the current future states and your desired outcomes. And then, and this is important to create meaningful plans, you document the driving forces, which are anything that are pushing you forward to create your desired future state, the things that are working in your favor. Then you weight those and start to document the restraining forces, the things that are holding you back from moving forward, and weight those. I often use a 1 to 5 rating for the weightings, but again, that's entirely up to you. Now, as you document the restraining forces, right, Think about any data or anything, any knowledge that's missing that you don't have yet, but you need, and document that as a restraining force. The quality of the plans are only going to be as good as the quality of thought that you put into this form. When you feel you've got it completed, then you ask two simple questions to turn this into an actionable plan that will help you get results. You start by asking about the restraining forces. Take your foot off the brake first, right? How can I reduce or eliminate the restraining forces that are holding me back from making progress, including, right, how do I get the information that I need but don't have yet? Who would need to do what, with whom, how, and by when? Remember, and if it's missing information, this will prompt you to get the information you need. The next question is the opposite side. How can I strengthen or add driving forces to propel myself forward even faster? These are documented the same way. Who is going to do what, with whom, how, and by when? And now you've turned all of this analysis you've done into an actionable plan that ties back to desired future results that you want with your sales force. The only thing left to do then is execute those plans with discipline. Far too many leaders don't really treat these initiatives like the change management projects that they really are. So if you really want to move the needle and change results, not only do you need to execute well, but you need to measure progress or the lack of it, right? Fail fast if you're going to, and then figure things out. Evaluate what your measurements are telling you, pivot and make adjustments to your plans as you need to, and then continue to execute and go through this loop until you get the results that you want. I know it sounds easy to say, right? But execution is really where the wheels come off the bus in many cases. It's true that an average plan, well executed, will beat a great plan that's bumbled. Many other leaders get the best stuff in motion, but then they let up on the gas pedal, right? And then things fizzle out. You need to stay the course until what you're doing just becomes, again, my definition of culture, the way we do things around here in air quotes, right? That's how you get things to stick. Now, a quick example, I can't name names here, but I do have an example of a client who took this approach step by step, and they did it over a 2-year period. They did the 6 things that you see here to really be able to move from a random approach to Salesforce effectiveness and a formal strategic approach. The results have really been impressive. Their EVP of sales recently said to me at the end of 2022, Mike, we just closed our best year ever, and we far outpaced our competitive set, right? Which for them was really important. They were thoughtful. They engaged leaders across the company, cross-functionally. It wasn't just the sales team. They took advice, they planned well, but they owned this thing, and they truly executed and held each other accountable, and obviously paid off for them. To their credit, one of my favorite sayings, they're pleased but not satisfied, right? And so they're continuing to do this work at this point, right? And continuing day to day to take things to a new level. I have absolutely no doubt that they're going to continue to be wildly successful and remain a leader in their space because of it. So allow me to summarize briefly. We started with a situation assessment to determine point A and point B with all those outcomes and priorities that you want. We looked across the list of the 10 factors that I shared that I consistently see influencing distributor sales forces, and you figured out which ones are really impacting you, what's the urgency of them, how would you rate where you are and where you need to be. We turned that into a force field analysis to list the things that are moving us forward and holding us back, and then use that to create an action plan to reduce or eliminate restraining forces, strengthen and add driving forces, and execute in a way to measure, evaluate, and adjust and continue to get the results that you want. And here are those 5 bullet points on a slide that make it look so easy, but there's some work behind this, as you obviously know. Now, I want to offer some final closing advice as a caution about change readiness. I did 2 polls on LinkedIn recently that I'm going to share with you. The first one asked about the percent of sales leaders who are truly committed to pursuing the highest possible level of sales effectiveness. The results were a little disappointing, as you can see here, but it's not really different than what my experience over many years has told me that it might be. 71% of the respondents thought that 50% or fewer of senior sales leaders are truly committed to getting the highest possible levels of sales effectiveness. Now, in fairness, this is not just wholesale distribution, right? I did this on LinkedIn, and it's a wide swath of verticals and sales leaders in general. There's a lot under this, I think, though, and it really speaks to, do we really want to tackle the hard things and make change because it's outside of our comfort zone? The second poll I did was about salespeople themselves. I asked what percentage of B2B salespeople truly strive to achieve sales mastery or be like a sales Olympian. The commitment motivation scores that we saw earlier, probably an indication of what we're seeing here. 61% of the participants out of 264 votes said that between 0 and 25% of salespeople truly strive to be the very best that they can be. And this is something that you're going to need to be cautious of in your organizations, to know that managing change is going to require managing the people and their emotions, because it's very likely they're going to be resistant to the change that you want to make, right? Because almost everybody recognizes that change needs to happen. They just don't want it to happen to them, right? Don't let this happen to your company, whether you're a C-level executive or whether you're a senior sales leader yourself, right? Inertia is the enemy of growth. So you've got to really stand tall and walk right into the tornado to figure things out and come out far better on the other side. Now, that's it today in terms of content, but I want to show you that there's an appendix in here and what's in it so you can peruse it when you receive it. There's a little bit more about me, and probably more importantly, places to find my content or contact me, or get connected on LinkedIn or Twitter. And because it's so important, and the fact that it's often overlooked, I've provided quite a few resources here on change management, that if you want to educate yourself more on various change models or change management in general, you can dig into and ensure the best chance of success in this stuff at your company. So we've got a few moments left. So I'd like to, Ian, ask you to come on back, and let's see if there are questions that we can answer. And I'll promise you this, folks, if we can't get to your questions here, you've got my email. If you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to try to answer anything we can't get to here. Ian, what have we got?
Yeah, we got a couple. Hey, do you want to go back to the slide that has your email address on it so people can write it down if they didn't see it? I know you do a lot of training and consulting, and I've seen you in action. So people, if they want best training anywhere, they should hire you. Just,
Bless you, sir.
You're welcome. So I have a couple of questions from viewers. I've got a couple myself. Jerry wants to know, when it comes to the average age of a sales rep and tenure in the role, do you think there's a difference between all verticals and wholesale trade?
Yeah, I think one of the things that investors actually look at is the average age of executives at companies. Because the higher that average age, the riskier it is if they don't have succession plans. You can do the same with a sales force. And I think that we do see in wholesale distribution that the average age of the sales leaders and sales people themselves are higher. Again, very mature vertical. There's been less movement between companies that there is in the market in general. So we tend to see people who are older and people who have been with companies longer working with the same customers. And that's how you get into this momentum fuel thing versus a state of continuous improvement. Also, to be honest, Jerry, sometimes I see more resistance in wholesale distribution to change in sales or sellers kind of pushing back on things that management wants to do because they have been almost left alone for so long that all of a sudden trying to shift into more of a sales operating rhythm or adopting a new process or methodology, it pushes them out of their comfort zone. So yes, I do think that we see higher ages and longer tenures in wholesale distribution than we do in the general market.
Great. And then Jared says, Mike, do you think that when building a sales team, the best move is to hire from other verticals, in other words, non-distribution verticals, given their desire and trainability? It doesn't seem like there's a ton of benefit to build a team with outside hires within distribution, as opposed to outside hires from other verticals, or am I misunderstanding?
Well, so I'll say this, in wholesale distribution, there are elite sellers. I think the answer to that question is going to be really contextual, Jerry, based on what exactly it is they're selling to whom. If it's something that requires a deep industry or product expertise, you're probably better trying to find the best sales DNA you can of people available in distribution and training them on the skills. If you've got it set up in your organizational structure that you have engineers and subject matter experts who can support a salesperson who doesn't have as much of the industry knowledge, then you have a better shot of hiring what I laughingly call green beans, right? People from outside the space entirely who are green. And if they've got great selling skills and the internal subject matter expert support, that combination can work wonderfully. The other thing that's really fascinating is that I find sometimes, although they don't like the idea initially, but people who have that engineering mind, or engineers or highly technical people, they don't want to do sales because, you know, the reputation that sales has had for so long has been tarnished. But when you sell in a buyer-centric, consultative, value-oriented, outcome-oriented way, and you are truly an advocate selling in your customer's best interest, and you teach people that way, I find sometimes that the technical experts, problem solvers, really logical, want to help figure things out, they actually trained in sales can really be exceptional. So I think it's a bit contextual, and I'm sorry for sort of an it depends answer, but
No.
you can make either work if you're hiring smart and shoring up on the things that they don't bring to the table.
And training the heck out of them, right? So
yeah, I mean, that's it. Train, coach, and set up an environment that reinforces the things that you want them to be doing, right? And there's so much about the way training is implemented that is ineffective in general, that when you get that right, you can actually make what you do part of the culture. You integrate the words and things in what you're teaching into forms. You write it into your CRM, right? You can do things to just make it part of your process and workflow. And then it just becomes the way that we do stuff around here. It takes a while to get there, and it requires support from frontline sales managers doing coaching and inspecting what they expect, right, to make that change happen. But either can work.
All right, can you go to the last slide real quick? You guys will give me 30 seconds. I'll tell you about a couple of upcoming programs from Distribution Strategy Group. Let's see. I don't think we have that slide, so that's okay. Hey, Mike, thanks very much for doing a wonderful webinar. It's been fantastic working with you. I learned a lot. I know our audience did too. I hope you'll come back and join us again sometime.
I would absolutely love that. This was a blast for me. You can probably tell. And I really love this profession, and I want to see distributors succeed as best they can through the coming years. So if you have questions about this stuff, folks, please feel free to reach out. And thank you for coming. And if you're watching a recording later, thank you for watching.
And I'll do my favorite goodbye in this context, which is happy sales to you.
Until we meet again.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for attending. Mike, wonderful job. Talk to you soon, my friend.
Thanks,
Bye now.
Ian. Bye.